Chapter 1. The Heir of Fire. The beam of light sparkled in the stairwell for one last moment, hovering like a ray of sunlight piercing the clouds, and was gone, the slam of the door made louder by the stifling silence that followed. Jayden Ryanthorn, heir to the throne of Crysin, slumped in the corner of his dark cell, grateful for the departure of his jailor. Damp moss soaked through the tattered remains of his breeches, and only slightly more numbing chill than the stale, frigid air of his prison. What little warmth could be found came from muck on the floor, droppings of who knows what from previous tenants mixed with the water that permanently dripped from cracks in the natural rock of the ceiling. He forced his toes deeper into the greasy quagmire. His mother had always told him that the feet were the most important part of the body to keep warm. He was a man now, he supposed. His 18th name day had come and gone, a day he preferred not to think about. Instead, he tried to look back on the innocence of his childhood, remembering the faces of family and friends who had shaped his life. Had anyone in Eridan survived? Could they have? It was no use. The images of that day burned in his memory as the city had burned, as the castle had burned, as his home had burned, leaving him alone in the world. As he had done so many times in the past few weeks, he turned to the sound of his own voice for company.
"No one to help you now, little prince. You've got to be strong or die. They're all gone. Death. So cold. So easy to sleep forever. To be with my family. My family."
Time stood still as he floated in a strange place that looked like the world he knew, but was somehow different. He bumped his head on the ceiling.
I'm floating. Am I dreaming? Is he in my mind again? I will kill them all for what they have done.
He bolted upright, his eyes wide. He had not realized he was so tired. So close to despair, so close to giving in.
I must be free.
There was a sound at the top of the stairs. The light was back, bringing hope. It could not be the sorcerer again, come to fill his mind with hallucinations of his parents' gruesome deaths. Not so soon. Was it soon? Had he slept? Was it the imp? The vile creature was sometimes sent to bring bread and water when its master, Hysenthor, had more important things to do than torture the muddy boy in the dungeon. He closed his eyes and waited. The light slap of small leathery feet padding down the stairs indicated that it was the servant and not the master. Jayden knew he had no hope against the old man with his burning eyes.
Those merciless eyes.
But the creature was a different matter. Imps were not a physically imposing race, far smaller than trolls and most of the other vicious creations of the jealous ones that lived in the high places of the Crystal Mountains. The thing was as cruel as its master, yet vulnerable. He would need every ounce of strength he had. Keys jingled, followed by a muttered curse in a foreign tongue, and the rusted cell door creaked open. He lay motionless on his stomach, waiting. Through closed eyelids he perceived the light from the creature's torch. There was a series of small sucking sounds as the foul little beast approached through the sludge. He wanted to scream when the cold water that was meant for him to drink was instead splashed across his exposed back, but he remained quiet, motionless. A furry, clawed hand with a rough, leathery, worn palm grasped his arm, shaking him. Still he did not move. The creature muttered a curse, sat down its torch, and grabbed Jayden's shoulder with both hands, heaving him over onto his back. Through one now partially open eyelid, he could see its hideous, furry face as it neared his own. Saliva dripped from long fangs, matting the dark fur around its mouth. Two lidless black slits devoid of kindness stared down at him, hating him for being human.
"Is it awake?"
The imp's voice was a deep bass rasp, an eerie sound for its diminutive size.
"Is it dead?" Dead, I think. You dead, human? Me think you dead before. You play good, not even breathe. Cold and pale like fish. You no smell dead, human. Freshly dead. Hubert eat you soon, maybe, after you rot a bit.
Jayden lunged, fighting to get to the creature's neck through the thick, tangled mass of matted hair. They rolled twice through the slop, the imp fighting ferociously. It was stronger than he would have believed possible for something so small. Less than 4 feet tall, it was all lean muscle covered in coarse dark hair, with rigid leathery wings on its back, too stunted for flying. At last, he gained position above the beast, squeezing its jugular with both hands. He realized with dismay that in his weakened condition, Hubert was stronger than he was. It was by sheer weight alone that he managed to stay on top. The imp gave up trying to remove Jayden's hands, instead using its sharp claws to tear bloody gashes in his stomach. There was nothing he could do but hold on for his life as he began to lose blood. His vision blurred, and just as he thought he would pass out, the imp's movements began to slow. Before he knew what was happening, there was a rush of air and he was lying face down in the muck. The creature, nowhere in sight, vanished. He looked around wildly, expecting the crushing blow to fall, but discovered that he was alone. The cell door was open. His breath came in ragged sobs as he wondered again if he was dreaming. He rose, only to fall back to his knees in pain. On the second try, he managed to maintain his balance. He squinted as he picked up Hubart's abandoned torch and moved to the door, slipping in the slime and nearly extinguishing the light. To the right was a sure way out, if he could only manage to sneak through an entire fortress of enemies, all who were sure to be looking for him soon if they were not already. To the left was the unknown dark. His decision was made for him as the stone door at the top of the stairs began to grate inward. He ran left. Along the way, he passed scores of empty cells, many with the remains of previous occupants still inside. It seemed the sorcerer did not like guests. The fact that Heisenthor deemed him important enough to keep alive this long did not make him feel very special, though. The only thing that kept him from being discovered was the twisting and turning of the passages, which doubled back on themselves as often as not. If he had not been hopelessly lost to begin with, he surely would have become so by now. He thought about discarding the torch, but quickly dismissed the idea as folly. If he did manage to evade his pursuers, he would need the light to survive. Only once in his flight did he stop to catch his breath and gather himself. He was quickly becoming too fatigued to go on, but the appearance of torches at the end of one of the halls, in the direction he had just come from, gave him enough frightened energy to continue. Sourly, he thought of all the times he had prayed to the great thoughts for light as he slowly went mad in the dark confines of his prison, and now the light heralded his certain death as a beacon that marked the enemy. On he ran. Just when he thought he could go no further, he was struck by a sudden barrage of blinding light that put any torch to shame. Every color of the spectrum assaulted his sensitive eyes, and he gaped with helpless wonder as a new chamber opened up before him. It took him valuable time to adjust to this new onslaught of visual brilliance.
What is this place?
He shielded his eyes against the harsh glow, as far overhead a staggering array of crystals diffracted the light of his torch, heightening its intensity 1,000-fold and sending it back at him. His eyes eventually adapted enough that he was able to judge the true size of the chamber. It was enormous. A small, clear lake in the center of the immense space reflected the overhanging crystals with perfect clarity, making it seem as though another chamber descended from the first straight down into the depths. Hope faded as he realized he would be caught here. His pursuers were far fresher than he, and the chamber was too long to reach another opening.
At least I will die in a beautiful place, and not that dingy prison cell.
The weeks of solitude had prepared him for this moment. He was no stranger to death. He turned to face his fate head-on, determined to put up what little fight he had left. As he did so, He noticed a little hole in the wall just large enough that one person might be able to squeeze inside. Setting down the torch, he made a dash for it, managing to scramble up a small stretch of loose rock and disappear into the shadow of the wall just as the hunting party burst into the chamber. He did not get a clear look at his pursuers, but he saw enough to know that they were not imps. They were not men either. They were far too big. His pursuers spoke in deep, guttural grunts, unintelligible to him. He knew it would not take them long to notice his convenient hiding spot, especially when they saw the fresh disturbance in the rocks right next to his discarded torch, and sure enough, their voices soon grew louder as they approached. The hole narrowed into a miniature tunnel at the back. Lying down, he pushed himself feet first into the little space and hoped that the creatures were too large to come in after him. Closer the voices came, and deeper he squeezed into the ever-shrinking hole, until he could feel rock on all sides. Torchlight filled his vision. He gave another urgent push backward, realizing suddenly that his feet had crested a ledge of some sort, and there was nothing beneath them. Wiggling his toes, he tried to touch something solid, but could not. It was conceivable that there was a short drop, and more space would open up. Or perhaps he preferred not to think about the possibility of a long plummet onto a hard surface. Still, it was better than what awaited him at the other end. Again, he forced his body backward, wedging himself in until it seemed that the weight of the world above was bearing down on his chest cavity, pinning him against the rock below. He could breathe only in short gasps, which came painfully loud to his ears, considering the close proximity of the enemy. His knees crested the ledge. Further still he pushed, jamming his shoulders in to the point where there was no going back, even if he chose to. He could no longer push at all now, only wriggle like a fish in a vise. So, wriggle he did, heedless of the rock scraping his skin to shreds and aggravating the already weeping wounds in his stomach. His legs hung down into the unknown, their weight helping pull him through, but he still felt nothing beneath him, and breathing had become impossible. Panic began to set in as he realized the very real fear of suffocation. He thrashed about recklessly in a final effort to dislodge himself, until the rocks gave way and he fell.